What's up? It's Randeep and Dan, and we're back. And we finally have Quinn Hughes and Elias Pettersson contracts to talk about, Randeep.
Finally, the most contentious issue in Vancouver, the most highly anticipated deals. They're finally done, Reach.
Yeah, and it took some time, as we know. And what's always funny about these negotiations is, we think back to the early part of the offseason. What's the number going to be? What are the combined cap hits going to be? And, Elliot Friedman would come on the People's Show and he'd say, probably around 13 to 15 million, somewhere in that range, maybe up to 16 in the higher range. And lo and behold, 15.2 million is the combined cap hit of Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes. We know they go short term with Pettersson, 3 years at 7.35 on the average annual value. And for Quinn, 6 years buying 1 year of unrestricted free agency and a 7.85 average annual value. Did the Canucks get a good deal on their two young stars?
They did. And the reason I say that is when, two different deals. And as you mentioned, you're only able to go long term on one of these guys. You'd have to go bridge. You don't have that much money available. But with the Elias Pettersson aspect, I think, a lot of people look at that term and say, wait a second, that's not a good deal. It is a good deal because you got to acknowledge what the player wants in this situation as well. Elias Pettersson's had some really good years. Points per game are high. It's 0.93. He's doing, a great job early on in his career. But the problem with him is he's been hurt for the first couple of years. So going long-term with a player that has produced at a high level but hasn't had maybe the durability, there's a show-me deal for both sides here. Elias Pettersson's going to be able to show the hockey world that he can make more than 7.35. And for the Canucks, they want to see a little bit more. They want to see a little bit more production and stay healthy. And by that time, in 3 years' time, you're able to pay the guy on a long-term deal if you see fit. Quinn Hughes, come on, you got him on a 6-year deal. This is a player that is a special elite defenseman on the offensive side of things. You want to see some more on the defense, but in the short term, at the very least, if he's going to give you, a number of points, he's going to drive play and be the number one defenseman you want him to be over the next 6 years. I wouldn't say it's a discount. It definitely comes with its own question marks, but you have your number one defenseman ready to go for the next 6 years.
I know people like to think of like doomsday scenarios when we talk about the Vancouver Canucks. Yeah, I'm pointing at you, Canucks fans. But it's a reality, okay? With the short-term deal for Elias Pettersson, you're wondering, okay, would he just go to arbitration after the third year and then walk himself to free agency, a la what Mark Stone did with the Ottawa Senators? And I do think that there's some validity to that, but at the end of the day, the Canucks still will own his rights at the end of the 3-year deal. They will control what the future looks like in that scenario. And if they're so bad and it becomes a Jack Eichel situation, well, that's awful. And you're looking at a lot of different scenarios 3 years from now, if that is the case. End of the day, Canucks will be able to give Elias Pettersson the most amount of money when he comes out of this 3-year contract. And that generally means you hold all the cards in that player's future, and better chance than not, he is going to stay with your team. For me, there's more risk on Quinn Hughes here, Randeep. 6 years, a ton of money. This is a bet that Quinn Hughes is going to be closer to Cale Makar like he was in his rookie year than what we saw last year. But we have two very different seasons from Quinn Hughes. One where he was really solid at both ends of the rink, and another where he was only solid at one end of the rink. And that's a big risk to take with the amount of money that they're committing here to Quinn Hughes. I still believe in the talent, but there's a big ask that he's going to get back to being that player.
Question is, on the defensive side of things, it was bad last year. And, when you're in the run for the green jacket when it comes to the NHL, that's not a good spot to be in. Where Quinn Hughes needs to sort out his issues are on the defensive side of things. And he's going to get more support. Oliver Ekman-Larsson's going to eat more minutes on that left-hand side. So you will get a little bit more support on that. But over 6 years, you want him to be that number one defenseman. You want him to bring that defensive prowess to his game. And you saw a little bit of that in year one, but second time around, guess what? The league kind of knows what you're about. They target you, and that's exactly what Quinn Hughes got in the playoffs a couple of years ago in the bubble, but also in the regular season last year. But let's be clear. The Canucks' problems last year were not simply on Quinn Hughes. The whole team had a difficult situation, and I'm not giving them excuses. A, they were bad. B, they also had the worst COVID outbreak across the league. The question I do have now is, with these deals, Quinn Hughes for sure, But Elias Pettersson, in that 3-year deal, it's win now mode for the Canucks. Over the next 3 years, they have to make some sort of progress. And I'm not talking about making the playoffs. I'm saying contending. That's what this team is about. You've added all of a sudden players that are, high impact players. Connor Garland, you look at OEL, you look at some veterans in goaltending and Yaroslav Halak, and go through that list. They've got some really high impact players. And now they have their most important players signed to at least 3 years. This is a win now mode for Jim Benning and the Vancouver Canucks.
Yeah, and final thing on this, people seem to think this is unprecedented, the contract that Elias Pettersson has been given. Just have to go back 2 years ago. Matt Barzal has a $9 million qualifying offer in the final year, $10 million qualifying offer in the final year of his deal with the Islanders. And Matthew Tkachuk has a $9 million qualifying offer in the final year of his deal with the Calgary Flames. It will be similar for Elias Pettersson at just short of $9 million. And you mentioned win now mode. So before we go, we now see what this Canucks team is going to be. Everything is here. The pieces are put together for the most part. Is this a playoff team this year, Randy, coming off what was just a disastrous 2020-2021 season?
I think they are. They're a fringe one. They're going to, be battling for one of those final spots. I don't know.
That doesn't sound too confident, Randy.
No, hey, I think they are one. I think they'll be battling probably for that third spot in the Pacific Division and one of the wild card spots. So yes, they are a playoff team, but it's not going to be easy. In my opinion, there's a couple of teams that are above them. One team that is really solid in the Vegas Golden Knights, another team that's got a couple of superstars in Edmonton that is going to make it interesting. So the Vancouver is a part of that group. I expect them to make the playoffs, but it ain't going to be easy.
Yeah, you've got Edmonton, Calgary. I'd even throw the LA Kings into the mix as wild cards, plus the expansion franchise in Seattle, who it's been a bit topsy-turvy preseason for them, but they do have a pretty solid roster. I think they get in, Randeep. I mean, look, this team is all about getting into the playoffs right here, right now. They need Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes to carry them, but this should be a playoff team based on the talent. Certainly in the forward group, they should be able to score a lot of goals this year. How about defending them? Well, Thatcher Demko might be needing to put in a Vezina-type performance for that.
That's the question I have with this team. Defensively, on that right side, it's not looking great right now. OEL is a massive question of what kind of OEL are you getting? Is it the Oliver Ekman-Larsson of 4 or 5 years ago or closer to that? Or is this the player that we've seen the last 2 years in Arizona? And if Thatcher Demko, he might have to have a Connor Hellebuyck type of season for this team to be, a high impact team, because look back at the Winnipeg Jets a couple of years ago. Excellent top six. They had a solid top six. Defensively, they had some questions, and their goalie was lights out. The Canucks kind of profile that way. They've got a solid top six in the forward group. You could even argue top nine. Their goaltending should be really good. Defensively, I got some really big questions there.
Yeah. What do you think about the Vancouver Canucks in the upcoming season? And how do you feel about these deals for Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes? Did the Canucks make the wrong move in going short term with their star number one center? Let us know in the comments. We'll respond to as many as we can. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.